Hello, this is the second part of China and Japan project's expansion, and this part deals mainly with Japan. We will start with a new feudalism under strong Japanese leaders. So, in the 30th century, the unity that had begun, achieved in Japan, in the previous century broke down. Shoguns, and when I say shoguns, I mean military leaders. So military leaders in the north and the south of Japan fiercely fought one another for power. So usually when we have a country, we have military everywhere, north, east, west, south. And their main purpose is to maintain the country's stability, right? In case of Japan, things were different. What happened is that the military leaders, the shoguns, in the north and the south fought against each other for power. And when the same group fight one another, what's going to happen? It's going to collapse, right? So although these two rival courts came back together, a series of politically weak shoguns let control of the country slip from their grasp. The whole land was torn. By land, we mean Japan. So the whole Japan was torn by a factional strife and economic unrest. So now we're going to see the history of Japan, how Japan was doing a great job and then it fell down and then a couple of emperors took control of it and then achieved prosperity and made it the Japan that we know as a strong country that we have today. Okay, this is basically, in a nutshell, the lesson. Okay, and then before I continue forward, there is something that is so important that we need to discuss that worth pausing. And it's going to help you a lot in understanding the lesson, which is this diagram that shows you the feudalism system that Japan was following. By feudalism system, we mean the system that categorizes society into social classes, and each social class serves the one that is upper. So the first thing, we have the emperor, who was at the top of the Japanese society but had little real power. He was just an image of the country. And then below him was what? The daimyo. The daimyo were the wealthy landowners. And then next to the daimyos, we have the shogun. The shogun were the actual ruler of Japan because they're the one who know how to fight, how to make decisions, how to run the government, the officials, and all of that. But of course, the wealthy and the rulers need someone to protect them, so they had the samurais, the samurai warriors of Japan who used to fight with swords, protect the country, protect the rich people, and rich people would hire them for as a bodyguards basically. And then after the samurais, we have the peasants and the artisans, the people who do handcrafts that actually help. Here we see the agriculture, we can see people who work in fields and everywhere basically. That's going to help the society to grow and prosper. Without the peasants and the artisans, we're not going to have food, people are going to starve. And weird enough, here, okay, and this feudalism system, because we have old feudalism system, then new. So this diagram is going to be upgraded. Just mind here that the lowest class used to be the merchants who have items that they sell. They were the lower in the class because they had no real value in what they're presenting, because they're not self-cultivating. They must have a resource that they have to sell, but they don't have something that they can originate and, find themselves. So that's why they were in the lower class. But this is going to change. Do you see the structure? Emperor, daimyo, shogun, samurai, peasants, artisans, and merchants. So this entire thing is going to change. So let us here look at the local lords' rule. Civil war shattered in Japan for old feudal system. By old, we mean this exact system that I just explained. The country collapsed into chaos. Centralized rule ended. Power drained away from the shogun and the territorial lords in hundreds of separate domains. So Japan was structured into A, B, C, D, okay? E, F, G, let's say. And each letter was ruled by a wealthy group of people. Let's say, for example, Elon Musk is going to rule A. Someone else is going to rule B, just because they're wealthy. So Japan had no one centralized rule. It was chaos. Everyone had a piece of the pie. So power drained away from the shogun territorial lords and hundreds of separate domains. A violent era of disorder followed. And this time in Japan history, which lasted between 1467 to 1568, is known as the Sengoku or Warring States period. Powerful samurai seized control of old feudal estates. They offered peasants and other protection in return for their loyalty. These warrior chieftains, called daimyo, became lords in a new kind of Japanese feudalism. Okay? So daimyo meant great name. Under his system, security came from this group of powerful warlords. The emperor at Kyoto became a figurehead, having a leadership title but no actual power, which is like the emperor, right? So the new Japanese feudalism resembled European feudalism in many ways. So this feudalism system was not only in Japan, it was somewhere else in Europe, still applied there. But now we're going to see the shift and the change happening. So the daimyo built fortified castles and created small armies of samurai and horses. So basically, this group, these rich people here, wanted to protect themselves at any cost. So what they did is actually they created high castles that no one can touch or come nearby because they fear that people are going to turn against them or hurt them or conspire against them. Okay? And of course, they need some protection, not only the castles, so they also hired the samurais, warriors. Okay, let us continue from here. Later, they added foot soldiers, okay, with muskets to their ranks. So the muskets, as I told you before, it's the gun, the huge gun that you can actually shoot at a person. So rival daimyo often fought each other for territory. So even between the daimyo class, it wasn't peace. They had to fight with each other for power. Okay? So it was very chaotic. Now we're going to see the emperors and the leaders who actually brought prosperity and stability to the Japanese structure. And we're going to start with one of the most powerful, most known, brutal, and ambitious. This is how your book describes him, Oda Nobunaga. Let's see what Oda Nobunaga looks like so you can just have a visual about him so you can remember him. So what did Oda Nobunaga do? He defeated his rivals and seized the imperial capital, Kyoto, in 1568. So he was the guy who stopped the chaos and the fights and all of the nonsense that used to happen between the daimyos. And he was like, can you just stop? Okay, I'm going to take lead of everything. And following his own motto, which is rule the empire by force, Nobunaga did not know any sort of mercy. He was a very brutal, very rough guy. So to eliminate his remaining enemies, it included the rival daimyos as well as the wealthy Buddhist monasteries aligned with them. So later on, Nobunaga and his 3,000 soldiers armed with muskets crushed an enemy force of samurai cavalry. So Nobunaga had a fight with the shoguns. The shoguns who can't fight themselves, they hire samurais. And imagine having that fight with muskets. Let's see what's the muskets looks like. So you can have an idea. Okay, this is what it looks like. Okay, basically like guns. So imagine we have a war and we have a group, which is the samurai, that's going to fight with swords and another group that's going to fight with guns. Without even thinking, who do you think is going to win, right? So Nobunaga had that in his hand, and this is how he was capable of unifying Japan under his rule by force, okay? So this was the first time firearms had been used effectively in a battle in Japan. However, Nobunaga was not able to unify Japan. He was not able, okay? He tried his best, but it didn't work. He committed a suicide of samurai ritual when his generals turned around him. So he was fighting, trying his best to unify Japan. But what happened is that his army were gossiping about him and didn't like him, and he knew that they're coming to his house to kill him. So of course, because Nobunaga himself was a samurai, let alone a leader, he wanted to honor himself by not allowing anyone to kill him, and he killed himself. So Nobunaga, best general, his name is Toyotomo Hideyoshi. Let's call him Hideyoshi. Hideyoshi continued his fallen leader mission. Hideyoshi tried his best. He set out to destroy the daimyo that remained hostile, and then later on, by the end of the 15th century, by combining brute force with shrewd political alliances, he controlled most of the country. So, Nobunaga, Hideyoshi, and later on Tokugawa, all of them are trying to crush down this daimyo shogun wealthy group of people. Okay, this is their target. Nobunaga tried his best, but it didn't work. But one of his most effective things that he did was using the guns. Hideyoshi, he controlled most of the lands and he crushed down the daimyos. Let us continue. Hideyoshi did not stop with Japan. With the idea of eventually conquering China, he invaded Korea. See, Korea is that this poor thing that is in the middle that gets always in the way between the fights, whether it's the Manchurians with the earlier Chinese or with the Japanese. Korea been in the middle of all fights. So anyways, Hideyoshi invaded Korea and he began a long campaign against the Koreans and their main Chinese alliances. And when Hideyoshi died, his troops withdrew from Korea. So this is just an extra information just to tell you how Korea is always in the middle, having everyone around it. Now let's go to our last leader that we have in Japan and the most known figure in this entire history of Japan that people love him so much to nowadays, which is Tokugawa Ieyasu. So let us see what he did. So one of Hideyoshi's strongest daimyo allies, which is Tokugawa Ieyasu, he completed the unification of Japan. So if I told you Nobunaga was the person who unified Japan, that's wrong. If I told you it's Hideyoshi, it's also wrong. It's always Tokugawa, the guy who finished the mission, okay? So in the 16th century, Hideyoshi defeated his rivals at the battle of, let's see how we can say that. Okay, in this battle. Sekigahara, okay? So his victory earned him the loyalty of daimyo throughout Japan. 3 years later, Tokugawa became the sole ruler or the shogun. Then he moved Japan's capital. Remember, Japan's capital was Kyoto. Kyoto is where basically the daimyo class lives there. He changed it to Edo. Edo is a small fishing village that would later on become the city of Tokyo that we know today as Tokyo. So Japan was unified, but the daimyo still governed the local level. Okay, they're still not denied 100%. They still have some power, but not the ultimate power that they had before Tokugawa actually came. So to keep them from rebelling, Tokugawa Ieyasu required that they spend every other year in the capital. So basically he was so smart. He was like, you're trying to go against me. You're trying to ruin the country prosperity. You're trying to take over. You know what? Let me take all of you and actually lock you in one city. And this is how he took control of them. Okay? So, let's see where I stopped. I stopped right here. So he required that they spend every other year in the capital, Edo. Even when they returned to their lands, they had to leave their families behind as hostages in Edo. Through this alternate attendance policy, the other restrictions Ieyasu tamed the daimyo. This was a major step toward restoring centralized government to Japan. So as a result, the law overcame the rule of the sword, which is basically the power that the samurais had, and the daimyos and the shoguns fell because he locked them down. It's like COVID days when we had lockdowns. The same thing, the same strategy he used on them to keep them down and to make them lose their power. Lastly, he also founded the Tokugawa shogunate, which would hold power until mid-18th century. On his deathbed in 1616, Ieyasu Hideyoshi advised his son Hidetada, take care of the people, strive to be virtuous, never neglect to protect the country. And most Tokugawa shoguns followed that advice. The rule brought a welcome order to Japan. So that was our introduction for the Japan. Okay, let us go now to life in Japan. How was life like during Tokugawa rule? Okay, did people starve? Were they happy? Were they sad? Did it work? Did it not? What was his strategies? And so on. Okay, Japan enjoyed more than 2.5 centuries of stability and prosperity. And isolation. By isolation, we mean they did not contact the Europeans or countries nearby. Under the Tokugawa shogun, farmers produced more food. And when we say more food, it means what? More population. The population rose. Still, the vast majority of the peasants weighed down by heavy taxes. So everything was great, but taxes, they have to pay a lot. So that led lives filled with misery. The people who prospered in Tokugawa society were the merchant class and the wealthy. Do you remember this diagram? Let me go back to it. So do you see the peasants? They were here on top, right? On top of merchants. But now, later on, after Tokugawa took control, the peasants started to be the lower and the merchants started to be on top of them. And of course, we said that the peasants make the majority. Here it says the largest class. So the majority of people were devastated because they didn't have the income that they wished to have. So let us continue. However, everyone, rich and poor alike, benefited from the flowering of Japanese culture during this area. Although like people were struggling financially, but there were lots of benefits, which refers to stability and prosperity. Okay, society in Tokugawa, Japan. Tokugawa society was very structured. The emperor had the top rank, but was just a figurehead. Basically here, I'm just going to explain about the same diagram of the feudalism that I just explained, okay? The same thing. Don't let this entire long paragraphs fool you. That is difficult. It's easy. Just focus. So, the actual ruler was the shogun, who was the supreme military commander. Below him was the daimyo, the powerful land-holding samurai. The samurai warrior came next, and the peasants and the artisans followed them. The peasants made up about 4/5 of the population, which is the largest. And then the merchants were at the bottom. They gradually became more important as Japanese economy expanded. Okay, remember we said that Tokugawa did lots of great things in his society, right? And he brought prosperity and he unified Japan. When he did that, what happened is that because he did lots of great things, this chart is going to shuffle and change. And this change is going to cause lots of things. Now, let us see. From here, I would like from you to focus. Tokugawa era was remarked by a return to Confucian values and ideas. Remember the Confucian values that we respect the elders, that we prefer farming, and that we are very spiritual, very tolerant, and all of that. This philosophy came to Japan in the medieval ages from China. In Japan, as in China, Confucian values influenced ideas about society. According to Confucian, the ideal society depended on agriculture, which is farming, not commerce, not trading. Farmers, not merchants, made the ideal citizens. In the real world of Tokugawa Japan, however, peasants and farmers bore the main tax burden and faced more difficulties than any other class. Many of them, this is so important, many of them, what happened, let me just highlight. This is just for me, like to highlight the importance of this idea and concept for you to understand. Many of them abandoned farm life and headed for the expanding towns and cities. Why? Because living under Tokugawa is not going to help them a lot. They have to pay and they earn little. So, how are they going to make a living? They were frustrated and they preferred to just move to the city. There, they mixed with the samurai, artisans, and the merchants. And by here, the social class has changed. So the merchants are going to go on the top, and the peasants and the artisans are going to go down. And by mid-17th century, Japan began to shift from rural to urban society. Rural mean they only do farming, agriculture, let's call it vegan life, okay? But once they move to the urban life, it means factory, industrialization, producing things, and more than just farming, okay? They expanded, they would trade with other people, other countries, businesses, and all of that. So Japan has shifted now. It's not rural or whatsoever. It's not vegan anymore. So Edo had grown from, or Tokyo had grown from a small village in the 16th century to the largest city in the world. Suddenly it changed. Remember? It was very small, now it's very big. Its population was more than 1 million. As Japan's urban population grew, social structure changed. Okay? Social structure change. In these rapidly growing cities, people worked as manufacturers and wholesalers. Eventually, a class of wealthy merchants emerged. In turn, the daimyo, the samurai, dependent on taxing and shrinking farming classes, so their influence waned. So the rise of the large commercial centers also increased employment opportunities for women. So when the social structure actually changed and the merchants here became the majority, even the women who were very suppressed and had no voice started to have a life. It was an outlet for everyone and even to balance powers. And the only victim of this change were the farmers. Okay? So, still, women found jobs in entertainment and textile, manufacturing, publishing. Still, the majority of Japanese women led sheltered and restricted lives as business wives. They worked in the fields, managed the household, cared for the children, and each woman obeyed her husband without question. So let us go now to the culture under the Tokugawa shogun. How was the culture like? Were people cultured, or were they illiterate, or were they open-minded or not? Let us see. Traditional culture continued to thrive. Samurai attended ceremonial Noa dramas, which were based on tragic themes. They read tales of ancient warriors and their courage in battle. In their homes, they hung paintings that showed scenes from classical literature. But traditional entertainment faced competition in the cities from new style of literature, drama, and art. Townspeople attended kabuki theater. Kabuki theater is when actors elaborate costumes using music, dance, and mime performed skits about modern life. And the paintings the people enjoyed were often wood block prints showing city life. So he just basically just tells you that people really enjoyed art and literature and drama and the same thing as ever. But here they were loaded with samurai themes and kabuki. Okay? So the kabuki is the video that I've played for you in class. If you remember, you can just Google it and see what dance is that. It just tells a story. And please read the historical source information that you have in the book. Don't skip them. So kabuki is a traditional form of Japanese theater. This is the definition of it. Okay, so although kabuki was created by a woman, all roles are performed by men. Kabuki plays are about grand historical events or the everyday life of people in Tokugawa, Japan. So kabuki is usually related to Tokugawa era. So, for 400 years, kabuki has provided entertainment for the Japanese people, and more recently, kabuki has been performed for audiences around the world, including the United States. Major centers for kabuki theater in Japan in Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka. Okay, so the townspeople also read a new type of fiction, a realistic stories about self-made merchants or the hardships of life. The people also read haiku, which is a type of 575 syllable 3-line verse poetry. This poetry presents image rather than ideas. So this is what the haiku poems would look like. It's just basically composed of 3 lines. Okay, so we can say that people were very cultured and very open-minded. Let's go now to the contact between Europeans and Japan. Okay, so Europeans began coming to Japan in the 16th century. Remember, Europeans means they have ships, they have caravels, they travel, they conquer, they're wealthy, they think they're the owner of the universe. So they're going to show up in every story, every place, every time. So during the Warring States period, despite the severe disorder in the country of Japan, the Japanese still welcomed traders and missionaries from Portugal and later other European countries. These newcomers introduced fascinating new technologies and ideas. And within a century, however, the aggressive Europeans had worn out their welcome, which means like they abused the welcome. They just existed too much and they wanted to change Japan to another European center, which later on made the Japanese very angry. So, how was the first contact? Amazing. They welcomed each other. But then it's going to have lots of events that are going to build up. Let's see now. Portugal sent ships, merchants, and technology to Japan. The Japanese first encountered Europeans in 1543 when shipwrecked Portuguese sailors washed up on the shores of southern Japan. Portuguese merchants soon followed. They hoped to involve themselves in Japan's trade with China and Southeast Asia. Remember, the Portuguese were dying to collab with China, but China used to refuse them and not liking them and not wanting them nearby. Remember? But they tried to just fit themselves anywhere. So the Portuguese brought clocks, eyeglasses, tobacco, firearms, which is the muskets, and other unfamiliar items from Europe. Japanese merchants, eager to expand their markets, were so happy to receive the newcomers and their goods. So basically, it was a win-win thing. I will give you great things. You're going to trade. You're going to allow me to be in. We're friends. That's great. Back in Japan, the daimyo too welcomed the strangers. The daimyo felt that European goods could provide an advantage over their rivals. Basically, the daimyos, which is the wealth people, loved it that the Europeans have new technology because they're going to use that to protect themselves because the samurais with their swords are not helpful at all. Okay, so for example, they particularly were interested in the Portuguese muskets and the cannons. The cannons are the bombs, the black bombs. So, anyways, let us continue. The Japanese purchased weapons from the Portuguese and soon began their own production. They copied it. Firearms forever changed the time-honored tradition of the Japanese warrior, whose principal weapon was the sword. And here we're speaking about the samurais. It was a big thing, a big deal, traditional thing. Oh wow, but never again after the muskets appeared. Some daimyo recruited and trained corps of peasants to use muskets. Many samurai who retained the sword as their principal weapon would lose their life to muskets fire in the future compact. So the cannon also had a huge impact on the warfare and life in Japan. Now we're going to see like how the European existence in Japan changed the structure of Japanese life. They had only swords, they had only vegan simple living, but now we have lots of things that are going to change the importance of their culture, and one of them is the symbolism of the sword. Do you get it? Do you understand like the impact of how things change once the Europeans showed up? So, daimyo, remember when we said that they loved to build castles to protect themselves from enemies, yada yada. Actually, daimyo had built fortified castles like the Himji Castle to withstand the destructive forces of the cannonballs. The castles attracted merchants and artisans in other surrounding lands. Many of these lands were to grow into towns, into city in modern life Japan, including Edo, Tokyo, Osaka, Himji, and Nagoya. Basically, they just built that to protect themselves from the cannons. And here, this part just, if you got asked why they built the castles to protect themselves from the cannons and the muskets. So, anyways, Christian missionaries in Japan. Now, this is the part where made the Japanese upset, or at least Tokugawa and the emperors and the figureheads. Basically, in a nutshell, the Christian missionaries came. They wanted to convert everyone. They succeeded somehow, but the leaders did not like it. This is a simplified way to just for this entire paragraph, but I'm going to read it regardless. In 15th century, Christian missionaries began arriving in Japan. The Japanese accepted the missionaries in part because they hold on, I'm just like stuttering with this. Associated them with the muskets and other European goods that they wanted to purchase. However, the religious order of Jesuit, Franciscans, and Dominicans came to convert the Japanese, and this is what they were not honest about. The Christian missionaries came, but they low-key had their intention of wanting to convert everyone in the society and wanting Japan to become a copy-paste of Europe. So, Francis, a Jesuit, led first mission in Japan, wrote that Japanese were very sociable and much more concerned with their owner, which they prize above everything else. And then this guy, this Jesuit, actually baptized about 100 converts before he left Japan. And then later on, like within 50 years, around 300,000 people or Japanese converted to Christianity, which is a huge number. So he had a great impact. Okay. So this picture just shows you when the Portuguese ship wrecked and they had to jump to the land of Japan and introduce themselves. Let us continue. So the success of the missionaries upset Tokugawa so much. He found aspects of the Christian invasion troublesome. He was like, okay, I welcomed you to my country, but now you're invading it and you want everything to look like yours. No way, this is not what I welcomed you for. What are you doing? So the missionaries actively seeking converts, scorned traditional Japanese beliefs, and sometimes involved themselves in local politics. At first, Ieyasu means Tokugawa, it's the same person. Ieyasu did not take any action. He feared driving off the Portuguese, English, Spanish, and Dutch traders who spurred Japan's economy. He didn't want to convert them because they had lots of power and making his economy and country rich. But they did it too much. By 1612, however, the shogun had come to fear religious uprising more. He banned Christianity and focused on ridding his country of all Christians. He didn't want any Christian on his land anymore because he saw how rapidly people started to convert and leave behind the Confucian beliefs. So first it was the sword, now it's the Confucian beliefs. He was like, hold on, wait, this is not Japanese at all. We're changing to something that we're not recognizing or we're not familiar with or something we just don't want. So Ieyasu died in 1616, which is a very special date for someone to die. But repression of Christianity continued off and on even after he died. Other emperors were still following the same footsteps, which is to suppress the continuation of the spread of the Jesuit mission. And then for the next 2 decades under his successors, the issue came to a head. An uprising southern Japan of some 30,000 peasants led a justified samurai shook the Tokugawa shogunate because so many of the rebels were Christians, and the shoguns decided that Christianity was at the root of the rebellion. And after that, the shoguns ruthlessly persecuted Christians. Like at the end, they had to kill all the Christians to maintain Japanese, not European like. And also the European missionaries were killed and driven out of Japan. All Japanese were forced to demonstrate faithfulness to some branch of Buddhism. These policies eventually eliminated Christianity in Japan and led to the formation of an exclusion policy. Okay? Okay. That was regarding European contact, introducing Christianity, and the fall of the sword and the rise of the muskets and the guns and all of that. All right. Now let's go to the closed country policy and then we will be done. And this is very short. Please listen carefully. The persecution of Christians, now the Japanese killed all the Christians and kicked them out, right? After that part was an attempt to control foreign ideas. When Europeans first arrived, no central authority existed to contain them. The strong leaders who later took power did not like the introduction of European ideas and ways, but they valued European trade. So Japanese only liked the trading part. They didn't like what comes with it, the bag that comes with it. So as time passed, the Tokugawa shoguns realized that they could safely exclude both the missionaries and the merchants. And by 1639, they had sealed Japan's borders, instituted as closed country policy. So basically, they did not allow Europeans at all after that. Japan in isolation. This is the last part of how Japan went to isolation, how it protected itself from Europeans to colonize it. Because back then, Europeans were very eager to colonize anything that they see in front of them, let alone that new American lands. So, most commercial contacts with European ended. Only one port, one place in Japan was open, which is that Nagasaki. Nagasaki port, which is by the sea, by the coast, remained open to foreign traders, but only 2 people were allowed to contact Japan from the outside world. They were the Dutch and the Chinese. Why? Because these 2 were respectful. They knew their limits. They're not going to interfere with Japan business. So, earlier, the English had left Japan voluntarily. The Spanish and the Portuguese had been expelled. Expelled means kicked out. Since the Tokugawa shogun controlled Nagasaki, they now had a monopoly on a foreign trade, which continued to be profitable. And for more than 200 years, Japan remained basically closed to Europeans. In addition, the Japanese were forbidden. Now, this is the crazy part, okay? Listen. The Japanese were forbidden to leave Japan so as not to bring back foreign ideas. Japan would continue to develop, but as a self-sufficient country free from European attempts to colonize or to establish their presence. They knew the danger of Europeans and they understood it, so they decided to maintain their heritage. Europeans had met with much resistance in their efforts to open the East to trade, but expansion to the West and the Americas would prove much more successful for European traders, missionaries, and what? Colonizers. Okay, now let us go to the lesson review. I'm just going to review with you some key terms for the vocabulary. So the Ming Dynasty. What does the Ming Dynasty refers to? It's a Chinese dynasty that ruled between 1368 to 1644. All right. Hongwu. Hongwu is the peasant's son. Remember, he's the first emperor of the Ming Dynasty in China. He drove the Mongols out of China, Korea, and Manchuria, and concentrated the power in his hands. Okay, then we have Yongle. Yongle is the son of Hongwu. Remember, he's the 3rd emperor of the Ming Dynasty in China. He ordered the reconstruction of Beijing and made it the new capital. And also he's the guy who built the Forbidden City. Janha was the Muslim admiral, diplomat, and explorer who led the what? The 7 voyages, remember? And then the Manchus. The Manchus are a people native of Manchuria's land who ruled China during the Qin dynasty. And then the Qin dynasty, which is lasted between 1644 to 1912. And yes, dates are not imported, not included. Let's go to Kangxi. Kangxi was the first Chinese emperor of what? Of the Qin dynasty. And he is the one who brought internal peace and constructed many public works and patrons and arts. Let's go. The daimyo. We said the daimyo are what? Japanese feudal lord who commanded a private army of samurai. And then Nobunaga. Nobunaga was what? He was the brutal and furious ruler who unsuccessfully tried to unify Japan, but it didn't work. Okay? And then we have Hideyoshi. Hideyoshi was Japanese general. He served under Nobunaga and succeeded in controlling much more, but not all of Japan. And he cleared the way for Tokugawa. And then Tokugawa shogun, it's a dynasty of shoguns that ruled unified Japan. And then we have haiku, which is a form of poetry, Japanese form of poetry consisting of 3 unrhymed lines of 575 syllable. And then we have kabuki, which is a type of Japanese drama in which music, dance, and mime are used to present stories. And basically, that's it. If you have any questions, please write down in the comments, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much.